Hello, friends. Welcome back to Sustainable Work. I have my wonderful friend Greg Rex here with me. Greg Rex is the Amazon best-selling author of Stoked, a spiritual journey from employee to lifestyle entrepreneur. Here is Stoked. um, Greg has started and helped build 10 different companies. In 2002, burned out on the corporate grind, Greg decided to simplify his life and become a health coach. Partnering with co-founder Dr. Wayne Anderson, they pioneered and built what has become Optavia Inc., one of the largest and most respected transformational coaching companies in the world. Optavia was named America's second fastest growing company by Fortune magazine in 2020 and one of the most trusted companies in America by Forbes in 2016 and 2017. In the last 19 years, Greg has trained over 10,000 health professionals and health coaches and has helped over 150,000 people, that's a lot of people, Greg, improve their health and well-being. He's the living example of how to create sustainable work-life balance. And that is exactly what we want to learn from you today, Greg. Welcome.
Thank you, Maria. So excited to be here. The minute you sent me the invitation and I read about, I was a full body yes. I didn't have to think twice about. I would just like, yes, I'm in. So I'm excited to be here. This is a great conversation. I can't wait to hear the other speakers, and I'm really grateful that you're doing this work. This is so important.
Thank you so much, Greg. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm sure it's going to be very fun and fulfilling. So to begin with, I want to tell you to tell us a little about yourself. Who are you and what kind of work do you currently do? What are you interested in? What drives you?
Okay. Well, I'm up here in North Lake Tahoe, Nevada. You can see my shirt says off grid. I'm living in a sustainable lifestyle. I live off the grid with hydroelectric power in this beautiful cabin on 40 acres of just God's nature. It wasn't always this way. I had to work over the last couple decades to find that balance. But what I would say is I think of kind of going to this topic of sustainability. The one thing that I am is I'm a generalist. One of my mentors, his name is Buckminster Fuller. I reference him in every single chapter of my book, starts with one of Bucky's quotes. And one of the quotes that really stuck with me is Bucky said that integrity is the essence of everything sustainable. And so when I think, and he also said that like over specialization, when you get too narrow focused, over specialization is the first step towards extinction. So I had this like really passionate learning to learn about all different things. And there's some beautiful benefits in that. One of the downsides that I found was that sometimes I'm too dispersed, and I started to have to learn how to like focus in. There's this interesting balance of being a generalist and taking a holistic approach. I think that's really a big part of my my philosophy around sustainability is integrity, having a holistic ecosystem that is win for all. It has to be a win for all for it to be sustainable. So I've been a bit obsessed with that for my whole life. I think it could be innate in me. You know, one of my mentors, as I mentioned, is Tony Robbins, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but also Deepak Chopra. And he got me thinking about the mind-body connection and kind of bringing a little more spirituality into the physical, high-performance world of Tony Robbins. And he has this teaching that he teaches. It's an ancient philosophy of life. It's called Ayurveda. It stands for the science of life. You've heard of it?
Yes.
And when I did the test, I was a tridoshic. There's 3 doshas, 3 types. And tridosha is kind of when you're all 3, you're equal in all 3, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And so I think it's kind of innate in me to be like a generalist. When I was in college, for example, I loved triathlon. That was my favorite sport because there's, you know, diversity and variety. So I love to constantly be learning. I can never get satisfied with like good enough. I'm always, there's a great book. I'm going to recommend several books in our conversation. Books have had profound impact on me. There's a great book called Now Discover Your Strengths.
Mhm.
And there's a survey. If you buy the book or you buy the audio, you get a free code to take the survey called the Strength Finder survey. And what this does is the Strength Finder survey tells you about your innate, kind of your natural ability, your strengths and your talents. And when I did that, one of my top strengths is called maximizer. And what a maximizer is, somebody who always looks for models to try to make things better. They're always trying to improve on something. No matter where it is, they're always trying to make it better, always making it better. And I think that's part of why I've been successful over the years, is that I'm constantly trying to make it better. I never settle down and say, okay, good enough is good enough.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that, I myself is pretty growth oriented, and motivated by growth. So I can totally relate to this idea that there is more, and there is more, and there is more. And it's so exciting. Yes. So, there's so much I want to ask you, but to begin with, one of the things that I read about you is that some time ago, you got tired of the corporate grind, and then you decided to become a lifestyle entrepreneur. So can you tell me a little bit more, like, what did you get tired of? What's triggered that transition? And then what did it look like, the transition itself, like afterwards?
So I think there's opportunities in life to grow. Sometimes it's through motivation and desire. Sometimes it's through desperation and frustration. Like you hit that wall, enough's enough. That's what happened to me back in my mid-20s. I had a life-changing experience working with Tony Robbins, and he was a great mentor for me. And I got to travel around the country, learning from him, promoting his events, teaching his work. And that was very exciting and very great for me. So I got very much into personal development, high performance, modeling successful people in relationships and finances and health in different areas. But I got a little bit frustrated. And I was, because I go on these tours, we go to these cities, 2 years later, we'd come back to San Francisco. 2 years later, we'd come back to Toronto. And no matter where we'd come back, it was always interesting. I would find that about 80% of the people were the same people from the previous event.
Oh.
And only 20% were new. And I was like, why do these people keep coming back to the same event? It's basically the same event. Well, I believe in repetition. I believe in, that, but I realized that a lot of people weren't integrating. They were getting like a warm bath effect. They'd go to an event, they'd get this juice and excitement from the external event.
Yes.
But then they go back to their old environment. They'd go back to their old relationships, their old structures, their old ecosystem, and they would slip back in their old path quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that warm bath effect is very common in the personal development industry. So I started realizing there was a big need for something in between the events. There needs to be a community. There needs to be like an infrastructure to hold that lesson, that learning while you're working on it. And, events are great, but transformation really takes place, I think, when you have like a personal integrated experience. And that's where a coach can be super handy. So for me, I went through this experience of kind of getting burnt out on personal development, and I went into corporate America, and I left Tony Robbins and I went to work for a .com company. It was super exciting. We were really successful for the first couple of years, but I put all of my efforts into this, taking the company public. It was a small startup with 30 people. Within a year, we were up to 1,800 employees. We took the company public within 9 months. We had a record-breaking IPO. It was called, it was on the NASDAQ, and we were supposed to come out at $8 a share. We came out at $18 a share, and we just kept growing. But as I was like all in on that one part of my life, I was a bit myopic. I was over-specialized. Mm-hmm. I wasn't taking care of my health. I wasn't taking care of my relationships. I was all about taking the company public, becoming a millionaire, all this stuff. And I kind of lost my way. My normal personality was somebody who loved to have fun and is always out surfing and having, doing adventures. But I put everything on the back burner because I was so committed to being successful, what I defined success at that point. So when the smoke cleared, of course, you can't sustain that. And I went to this corporation and we got bought out, and it got ugly. It became a bloodbath. And we went from, 250 salespeople down to 60. And it was like, this .com bubble popped, and we went from being like where we couldn't do anything wrong to where we couldn't do anything right. And then the company was really shaken by 9/11. As many people were when 9/11 hit. This was back in the Twin Towers. It puts this shock in the whole world, and everyone got conservative, and so they laid off 800 people. I was one of them, so I got laid off. But at that point in my life, it was one of those midlife kind of crises. I was 37 years old. I was on the way I was a millionaire for a couple of days, and then the stock bubble popped, and then I'm 100,000-aire because everything went from $40 a share down to $4 a share in 2 weeks. Wow. And I was like, wow, I put all this effort into this company, and what have I got left? I've got $100,000 in debt. I owe more on the taxes on the stocks than they're worth. And the company's, on the fritz. I just got laid off. My relationships are on the rocks, and I'm 50 pounds overweight, and I'm completely out of balance. And I'm burnt out to that nth degree, like you were talking about. I was completely burnt out. And I was on this trip. I was down in Costa Rica. I'd supposed to have a 2-week surf trip, but I turned it into a 2-month kind of sabbatical to kind of like figure out, who am I? What am I going to do? And the kind of a wake-up call for me was when I was walking down after a surf session. I was super frustrated because I was so heavy. I was 50 pounds overweight. I couldn't catch the waves I wanted to catch. I didn't have any balance. I was unhealthy. And I was frustrated because these perfect, beautiful waves, and I couldn't get them. And I was like, I spent all this time and money to get here, and I can't do my favorite thing. And I'm looking at these, I'm walking by, and this guy, he's raking his front yard. He's a Costa Rican, and the Ticos are the most friendly people in the world. They're just so beautiful. And he smiled on his face, and he's raking his yard, and he's got like a roof, very simple house with papayas and chickens and pigs running around. And he's got this big happy smile, and he goes, "Pura vida," which means, pure life, happy. It's like aloha for them. And I look at this guy and I smile back, and intuitively, but all of a sudden I got this immense sense of jealousy. Like, I want to be that guy. I don't want to go back to the corporate grind and the concrete jungle and the traffic in Southern California and the dog eat dog corporate world. I want a simple life. I want to be with nature. I want to have time for surf, and I want to be happy and healthy. And I figured I've been putting all my energy into my wealth, and it's not working. Maybe I should have a new philosophy towards success. And I kind of changed my values. I changed my philosophy. My definition of success was more about balance, sustainability.
Yes.
And from that point on, I was obsessed with sustainability and balance.
That's amazing. Well, first of all, I love that you mentioned Costa Rica, because I had this experience last year. I went to Costa Rica twice, and I remember I got into surfing there. I've surfed before in California, but being there, it was a completely different experience. Surfing, warm ocean, the beautiful scenery around you, mountains, like green forest, rainforest, gorgeous. And I fell in love with surfing, and I went hiking, and I was like, I can live like this. Like, this is, it clicked in my brain. Like, it's actually possible to have this as a lifestyle. Like, I can surf, I can live here, I can hike, I can work, right? Because we are all working remotely right now, or most of us. So I just wanted to share it because you mentioned Costa Rica, and all of this beautiful flooding feelings came to me. But what I want to ask you is, you said I became obsessed with sustainability. So how do you define sustainable work?
Sustainability is I'm going to try to simplify it, because it needs to be looked at, I think, from a holistic approach. Sustainability is not one thing. But I would say, if you could boil it down to the closest to one thing, it would be integrity.
Okay, integrity. And we'll talk more about this.
Yeah. And another way of saying that is holistic, right? For example, when people go to approach trying to get to a healthy weight, 80 to 90% of people focus on diet and exercise. And only 15% of people are successful. 85% of people gain the weight back within a year or two because they're not taking a holistic approach, right? So I think the biggest thing that I would say that has to do with what is sustainability, it's about having a holistic ecosystem. And there's several principles that are related to that. But I think it has to do with that. And when I changed my values and I started looking at life through that, one big first step that I made that I think a lot of people can benefit from, most people, is my life was too complex and I had too many things going on. And if you're trying to juggle like 9 balls, it's very difficult. So I said, how can I simplify my life into like what's most important and really focus there, but make sure that those elements are holistic. So I started thinking of, and I'm passionate about like sacred geometry and nature. And I always see that like nature is super good at sustainability, right? So I try to model my life, my choices, my business, my finances, everything. I try to model it around what does nature do? So I'm down here in Costa Rica and I'm praying, God, give me a sign, Spirit, show me, what am I going to do with the next 20 years of my life? You know, I need to get my shit together. Sorry.
That's okay.
And what showed up to me was 3, the number 3. I saw 3, colored poisonous frogs, like with like right there together. I saw 3 beautiful birds. I saw 3 different types of monkeys, and I saw everywhere I looked, I saw 3, 3, 3. So I go, oh, that's got to be it. Spirit's talking to me about the sacred trilogy, you know, the Trinity. This is a sacred number. It's simple. And I go, oh, and I remember back from high school that geometry, they thought that the triangle was the most simple structure. I said, that's it. Okay, I'm going to focus. And I'd just started about a year ago. I'd started a business with my best friend called the Happy, Healthy, Wealthy Game. And we were focused on these 3 areas of coaching. And we had done pretty well. We had 2,000 people going through our program. We had 100 coaches that we were certified. And we were doing okay. But the problem was, even though I was doing well, I was making 6 figures. I was working about 20 hours a week, and that was okay. I had a little bit of balance, but the problem was I couldn't get my own health in order. I was teaching people about healthy body, healthy mind, and healthy finances. That was the trilogy. But I personally was still 50 pounds overweight, and all the exercise and all the dieting and all the effort that I was putting forward. It wasn't like I was sitting on the couch. I was like exercising 5 days a week. I was running triathlons. I was all organic. I was, out. But the problem was the exercise and the diet wasn't a complete approach. It was like a 2-legged stool, not very stable.
Right.
What happened was I met this guy, Dr. Anderson, who we mentioned earlier, and he had this vision for a coaching company. And it was a holistic approach. And so when I partnered with him, moving into that organization and working with a collaborative, instead of me being a solo entrepreneur, doing it by myself, I plugged into a bigger community of people. And so together, the mastermind and the synergy of us working together is what really developed Optavia, which is our company. And I'm really proud of our company. I mean, heck, 19 years later, when I started, there were 30 coaches and the company was doing $5 million a year in sales and the stock was only at 23 cents a share. Fast forward 19 years later, we're one of the best kept secrets. Like most people will have not have heard of Optavia on this call, but they will, because last year we were named the second fastest growing company in not just America, in the world, second fastest growing company in America, the only company in the top 100 list in the health and well-being space. And our company's going to hit $1 billion this year. So we went from 5 million to $1 billion. But we've been really slow and steady. This has been a real steady, sustainable growth. And I think I've learned a lot about personal sustainability as a life coach, but also I've learned a lot about building a sustainable organization, working with Optavia and working with the leadership and the corporate structure and stuff like that.
Mhm. So, you know, what I hear you say that, so we talked about integrity, right? That sustainability is about integrity. And from my understanding, what you said is integrity is really getting honest with yourself about things that are important to me, and then creating your life or setting up your life in a way that fulfills those, whatever you want to call them, values or needs or whatever. And when you are in alignment with those aspects of yourself or those needs or values that are most important, then you are in integrity. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes, integrity is an interesting concept, and I think it's worth taking a little time to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
One great definition of integrity that people talk about is wholeness, right?
Yeah.
It's wholeness. Um, a lot of people also, when they think of the word integrity, they think about, doing what you say, you know, being honest, saying what you mean,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's alignment. Another great word for integrity is alignment. Do my thoughts, my feelings, my actions align with my values? Do my words align with my thoughts and my values? So it's a lot of it's about alignment. It's coming together. Integrity is like integrating. It's coming together. It's togetherness. It's wholeness. And so that does have a lot to do with values in a corporate structure, especially, or in your personal life. So one easy definition that I like to say is my vision to help people is to help them create a holistic, integrated ecosystem that allows them to live their life around what matters most.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at trying to simplify that model, I came up with, and it's in my book, and something, if anyone wants my book, they can get it for free. This is what's called a tetrahedron.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 4. Now, the trilogy is 3. When I first started, it was healthy body, healthy mind, and healthy finances.
Mm-hmm.
I never had spirit in the equation. I had 3. And what I realized, this is interesting, I realized that there's no such thing as a triangle in nature. A triangle is a 2-dimensional concept of humans. In nature, a triangle is actually called a tetrahedron. It's a 3-dimensional triangle. That's what this is. It's equal. It's a triangle on each side. It's an equal triangle. And so tetralogy is the term I made up, which is basically the study of the sacred 4. And the number 4, whether it's the medicine wheel, whether it's the 4 elements, whether it's the 4 seasons, the sacred 4 it's classic. In every indigenous teaching, they have the medicine wheel or they have some version of it. So this sacred 4 is actually the most simple, stable structure is a tetrahedron. So instead of having 3 areas, and a lot of people in like the spiritual world have heard of mind, body, spirit, that trilogy, mind, body, spirits, and yoga. But what's missing? Finances. And a lot of the people that are in the spiritual world might have some blissful moments, but they're also a lot of times just like, how am I going to make my bills next month? How am I going to earn a living? The people that are on the other side without spirituality, and I was for that way for a while publicly, like, so I was living all 4 areas, healthy body, mind, finances, and spirit, but I was doing it in private. Like I'd go away for a retreat for my spirituality, or I'd do it on the full moon or the equinox. I would do it, but I was never public about it, never integrated it. So what I've noticed is since I've integrated that spiritual aspect for me, and I've allowed that to be who I am, and I allowed that to share within my work and not try to put my spirituality on anyone, but just help people identify what's their spiritual, where do they get their spiritual renewal? Where do they get from nature? Is it from going to church? Is it from community? Is it from study? Is it from Bible? Whatever it is, it could be a lot of different things, but making sure that people keep that piece in there because that helps them be more sustainable. It completes that trilogy, makes it a tetralogy, which is more sustainable. And I found that there's the same thing in business. In my book, Stoked, I had this image of, you ever heard of the book Good to Great by Jim Collins?
I don't know. I don't think so. I'm pretty bad with names though, so I may have not.
Um, Here it goes right here. So in the book Good to Great, Jim Collins talked about this trilogy of your gifts and your passions, your gifts and talents, and your business model, right? And in that book, he studied these companies that had gone from being good to being great. They became iconic companies. And what helped them make the shift is when they got really clear on their passion. They got really clear on what they're good at. And then they got really clear on creating a business model that allowed them to stay focused on what they're good at and what they're passionate about. Yeah. And I thought that was a great model until I heard about Ikigai. Same thing I learned. I thought the trilogy was the answer, but no, it's tetralogy. There's actually a better model, and it's called the Ikigai. And that's, yes, you identify your passions, what you love to do. You identify what you can be good at, your gifts. Find a way to make money doing what you love to do. But then over here, the important thing is, what does the world need?
Yes.
And then bringing that into it, because now you're holistic. Now your business is in service of the ecosystem. Your business is in service, and it's a reciprocal flow of energy. So I found that by working with people in these 4 elements, that's the simplest way to make, instead of going from 10 or 20 different goals, let's focus on 4 goals in 4 areas of your life. When you're done with those, we can add more. And so I really focus on simplifying, eliminating distractions, working with principles, helping people identify those values, those principles that become their North Star, so they're not sure what to do. They can go back to something that's eternal.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. Principles, values, and habits and routines, or what I call rituals.
Rituals. I love that. Love that you speak about rituals. So, and I love that 4th element, right? What does the world need? And talking about, because the question I had earlier while you were speaking about, like, you said, I help people create ecosystems. And I was curious about like, what do you mean? What do you mean ecosystems? So I want to ask you that, but from my understanding right now, it's kind of like you're helping them to create a relationship that's not just a relationship within yourself, with your body, mind, and spirit, but it is also your relationship with the world, with the whole ecosystem. And that's what makes it sustainable, because it takes into consideration the needs and interests of more than just yourself. It takes into consideration the interest of whatever, your community or whomever you're serving.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I know that we both share some shamanic and spiritual alignment philosophies. And one thing, there's a very classic phrase in shamanism, as above, so below, right? As above, so below, which means that the universe has, and the universe different ecosystems, and you could even call it like each universe has its own ecosystem. Like our solar system is an ecosystem, right? Our planet is an ecosystem. It has the moon that's very tied to that, because the feminine energy of that moon causes the ebb and flow of the ocean, and it causes a whole planet to breathe. So then there's an ecosystem of all the planet, all the plants and animals on our planet. And then there's an ecosystem of you, an individual, who's your community. What's that ecosystem? Your relationships, your community, your environment. So everything. And then you can go even smaller into your body as an ecosystem of 150 trillion cells that are all working together as little independent units to create one body. Each of those cells is an ecosystem. So at every scale, at every fractal scale of whatever you call universe, is an ecosystem of its own. For example, a cell. This is a very interesting thing I learned from Tony Robbins. Chicken cells, if they are put in the right ecosystem, we're able to outlive the scientists that were studying how long would these cells live. So there's a professor in Southern California. He started this study, and he figured if I could give them the optimal ecosystem, which they needed respiration, metabolism, and excretion of toxins. And they needed to also be maintained. Like there's an ongoing maintenance to it. But as long as they had those three basic principles, and that somebody would make sure that the system was moving and working, respiration, metabolism, excretion, and regeneration, because the cells regenerate. It's not the same cell. You know, these atoms are not the same atoms that were here a year ago. All of our atoms are replaced. All of our cells are replaced, right? So you have to think about this as it's a regenerative ongoing process. Well, what's interesting is when you give them this optimal nutrients and environment, these chicken cells just lived indefinitely. They didn't die. His students took on this experiment after the professor died, and they kept going. They finally gave up because the cells weren't dying. So if we can learn, that's why as a coach, before I help an entrepreneur work on their organization or their business, we got to start with them, the individual unit of their personal ecosystem. And then from there we can expand, because if this internal structure doesn't have integrity, or if there's holes, or there's too much toxins, or there's not the right nutrients, or there's not the right growth, or whatever, then this fractal, as you duplicate, it becomes dysfunctional. So you have to start with an optimal fractal to begin with. And that's why I'm so into sacred geometry. It's like this structure right here is there's two tetrahedrons. There's the one on the top, and then there's the one on the bottom, two tetrahedrons.
Yes.
This is the underlying structure of all spheres. Every sphere, this is the underlying structure of it. Two tetrahedrons, the masculine and the feminine coming together, create this perfect harmony, this perfect balance that then becomes reproducible. And you can take that structure indefinitely and then expand it in a fractal manner. So I always like to think in like starting with the most basic, and then get that structure right, and then you can expand and build from there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. So one thing that I love that, you know, you talk so much about nature and even human body, and that we can really learn so much from nature and from observing our own bodies, because I think a lot of times in our society, we tend to think that everything, all the power comes from the mind, right? And we worship the mind and the intellect. But what I observe going on, you know, in the society and in the world, the way, if we make decisions from that, they don't really lead to sustainability. However, if you look at how nature works, or even at how our body works, there's lots of lessons to learn there. It's a lot about cooperation, right? Working together, supporting each other. And that's how nature can sustain itself for billions of years, you know, because it works in symbiosis. So do our cells in the body, right? They're all functioning together so that this organism can live and survive. So my learning is, right, from all of that, is that as humans, if we want to have long-term results, we also need to work together and cooperate with each other.
Amen. Amen. Because, you know, there is no such thing, like one of Bucky's quotes, it's the first one in my book, is unity is plural, at minimum two.
Right.
There is no such thing as an individual. Even you as an individual are a collective of 150 billion, you know, trillion cells working together in synergy. So there is no such thing as doing it as individual, and creating your ecosystem. It includes not only the physical structures around you, but the people, and the people you hang around with is probably the most critical. I mean, we've heard this phrase that, you know, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. Well, there's a study done in 2007. I've been studying healthy weight and helping people, you know, have a healthy body for, you know, a long, long time. And for a long time, we thought that obesity was genetic, you know, and that it was like based on either your ethnicity or maybe, you know, where you lived and your financial income. And we started going through different things like, what is it that creates somebody leads to somebody becoming obese or not? Well, in 2007, they did a test. This is the most robust study, 40,000 participants, called the Framingham Study. And what they found is the most accurate predictor of whether somebody was healthy or obese was not their ethnicity, was not their genetics, was not their geography, was not their income level. It was their social network. It was the 5 or 10 people that they hang around with the most, because our behaviors are influenced by our environment. So you can have willpower until you're blue in the face, but it's only going to last a short period of time. It's unsustainable. And so what we found through coaching is that if we can tap into somebody's values, if we can tap into their intrinsic motivation, not extrinsic, carrots, sticks, rewards, recognition, how many likes do I get, how much money do I have in the bank, all that stuff is temporary. It's not sustainable. If you want to have unsustainable success, use carrots and sticks. If you want to have sustainable success, tap into the essence of integrity, which is values, which is what's aspirations, what's most important to you. And yes, and that is, we're social beings. We're tribal creatures.
Yes.
We need each other. Even to find out our true values, you have to make mistakes. You have to bump up against, being imperfect and say, oh man, that was a terrible mistake. Look at the impact that had on my community, or the impact it had on my relationship. I don't want to make that mistake again. So we have to learn through mistakes. And I think that one of the things and I try to help pass along to people is to help them realize that there are some universal principles, immutable laws. There's no exception to. And you can try to align with these immutable laws, these universal natural principles. And you can, instead of fighting the forces of nature, you can ride the forces of nature. You can let that current pull you.
Yeah, can you speak to what are those universal laws of nature that that we better align ourselves with and fight against? What are they?
I often refer to my mentor Bucky, Buckminster Fuller. If you haven't heard of him, do a Google search on Bucky. He was the gentle genius. He spent 50 years of his life trying to answer this question. His mission was, how do you make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest amount of time possible through spontaneous cooperation without the disadvantage to our planet or anyone on it?
That's beautiful.
That was his mission. He spent 50 years trying to answer that question. He was really smart, like Einstein, one of the smartest men. He invented the geodesic dome. He predicted 50 things that would happen in 50 years. 49 of them happened. One of those things was he predicted the internet. He predicted, flight to the moon and back in 1927. So this guy is a brilliant, brilliant man. And so he said, how's one guy out of billions going to help all 100% of humanity? He said, the only way I can do that is if I employ natural principles. He called them principles. I have to employ these natural principles and let nature do the work. I just need to kind of just nudge things. He called it being a trim tab. A trim tab is like a rudder. If you're on a big, big ship and you're going really fast, all the friction against that rudder makes this really hard to move. So what they do is they have a rudder on the rudder. They have a little, what's called a trim tab. It's a little mini rudder. And this little mini rudder starts to push and then it pushes the rudder. That's called a trim tab. So he said, I'm going to have to be a trim tab, to be a little guy pushing just at the right time, a little bit of force that creates a massive force. So that's one of the principles. His first principle is integrity. That's one of the universal principles. And he said that and if you want to get more, I actually cover a lot of the principles in my book, Stoked. If you want to get a copy of the book, get it for free. Just go to stokedthebook.com and you can just pay the shipping and you can get a copy of the book for free. Okay. Cover 2 or 3 of the principles. You're welcome. I'll cover 2 or 3 of the principles right now, but there's more than we have time for. But integrity was one of them. Another principle was called leverage. And the universal principles have 3 characteristics. Number 1 is there's no exception. They're eternal, they're immutable, there's no exception. Number 2, they are interaccommodative. So all these universal principles are happening simultaneously and they don't interfere with each other. Actually, oftentimes they're synergistic to each other. And then the third thing is they're so predictable, you can mathematically prove it. So his generalized principles had three things. One, no exceptions, universal. Number two, interaccommodative. Number three, provable by math. You can write an equation to prove it. So like leverage. Leverage works anywhere. If you have a lever and you have a fulcrum, no matter where you are, you put a little bit of effort here, you get a lot of results here. That works anywhere in the universe. Leverage is a universal principle. Synergy is a universal principle. Abundance is a universal principle. Procession is a universal principle. Unity is plural. At minimum two is a universal principle. So if you start learning these principles, they become a filter for how do I make decisions. If I have to choose on which path to go, which is the one that's going to have the highest probability of success? Well, it's the one that's going to be aligned with the universe. It's going to be the one that's aligned with nature.
I love it. Okay. I want to, in the remaining time, I kind of want to dive into, the work that you do with your clients. And, one thing that you mentioned earlier, that in your own experience too, you were coaching people and you were exercising and you had a healthy diet, yet you were still not in the way that you wanted to be. So what was that missing piece there? And also, like giving what you've learned now, like how do you start, where do you start the journey with your clients so that they get to that place of living in integrity and creating the life that they want?
Great question. Well, I think the first thing that I do is I really take some time to get to know them. There's three key elements that they need to create a future that's sustainable. You have to know where you want to go. You have to have a clear vision of what you want to create.
Mm-hmm.
And this vision needs to come from your intrinsic motivation, from your heart, right? Versus external, superficial carrots and sticks. So this vision needs to be from your heart, integrity-based vision. Second thing is you got to look at where am I right now? And you got to take an honest, sometimes uncomfortable assessment of where am I right now. But that's good because now you have what's called structural tension. You know where you want to be, you know where you are, and there's a tension there. That's natural tension. It's called structural tension. The next question is, what's my next step that's going to move me towards that? So those three things: where do I want to go? Why is it important? Where am I now? And what's my next step? So when I'm working with a client on their optimal health, we're going to look and we do an assessment. I call it the Trilogy Assessment. I'm sorry, the Tetralogy Assessment, which is we're going to look at, okay, and everyone could take this. We're going to put the link in, I think, so that people can take the free assessment. It's called the Stoked Wellbeing Assessment. And you're going to answer yourself in 6 categories in each of those things. So there's 6 things for your healthy body, 6 things for your healthy mind, 6 things for your healthy finances, and 6 things for your healthy spirit. And you're going to do a self-assessment on a scale of 1 to 10. Where am I right now? I'll get those results, and so will they. Whoever takes the assessment will get their results sent back to them. And if they like, we can schedule a one-on-one. And what we do is we would now say, okay, here's where you are. What's your optimal vision of the future? What does that look like? If you were to design your optimal ecosystem that would sustain you for decades,
Mm-hmm.
what would that look like? So then we get clear on that. And then we start working on a structure to where they can create a program that's going to get them there, taking those baby steps. But more importantly is while they're taking the steps, they need to create this ecosystem and habits and rituals that become automatic. So they can get out of their mind and the willpower and trying to force things into it flows from within. And it just becomes a routine. Like I'm sure that you have a kind of a morning routine like I do.
I do, yes.
I knew you would. That is one of the most fundamental principles of sustainability is having these sacred hours, like the 1 hour right when you wake up and the 1 hour before you go to bed. Those are the sacred hours. And if you dedicate some intention to create some structure and some integrity with those things, it kind of cycles you, keeps you through the day. The morning ritual gets you through to the night. The night ritual gets you up in the morning and you start the day fresh. And so it's a holistic system. So I would really work on them with creating that system. And then once they have that balance, then we might want to take the next step and say, okay, What about your optimal career? What would your Ikigai look like? What kind of culture, what kind of organization, what kind of team, what kind of business model, what kind of career path would give you that feeling of I'm on purpose, I have a passion, I have a mission, I know what I'm good at, I'm applying my talents in an area that feels good because I'm mastering it. I have a business model that pays me to do what I love to do, and I'm doing something that the world needs. My business, my service, my gift to society is enhancing the whole ecosystem. Like right now, being in wellness is a great industry to be in, but being in like coal, fossil fuel, that's toxic to our world. We can't have a bunch of people jump into that industry. It's toxic. We don't need more chemicals. We don't need more drugs. We need more natural healing. We have to look at these systems, these big global systems that are dysfunctional, and we have to come up with a new model that's going to make them irrelevant. And I think that's why I would say, if you want to bet into the future, bet on green technology, bet on wellness, bet on a new form of education. These other things, they have the potential to, enhance humanity versus destroy humanity.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree 100% with you. So you said that you help people create these rituals, right? But that these rituals or actions do not come anymore, would not come from the place of willpower. They will come from a different place, from alignment with something internal, with the values perhaps, or with the vision. So what exactly is the difference between, and what's the missing piece where these actions come from willpower and that makes them non-sustainable versus when they come from some internal values or desires? Why one works and the other one doesn't?
Okay. Well, I'm going to reference another book here, and the book is called The Path of Least Resistance. The author's name is Robert Fritz. And this guy, and I've done a lot of goal setting in my life, and I really looked at, setting goals and achieving goals. And, Tony Robbins, one of the best in the world, great mentor for me. But what I realized is that values, when people value extrinsic rewards, they value fame, fortune, power, wealth, these external things, they are carrots, right? And so people will go after a carrot, but it's unfulfilling when you get there. Like you get the big house and you go, okay, I got the house, but like that guy's house is way bigger than mine. And so it's like this endless loop that doesn't really satisfy you. You always, it's like you got to have more. That's like one of the diseases right now that I think kind of America and some countries are in right now. Is just like there's never enough. It's more and more and more. There's no such thing as enough. But there is such thing as enough. And there's actually such a thing as too much. There's such a thing as too much money or too much, food or too much things can become toxic as well. So looking at these principles, extrinsic things are using willpower, carrots, sticks to get you to do actions. Those actions are obligations, or they're coming from being not enough, right? I'm having to prove myself that I'm beautiful. I'm having to prove myself that I'm powerful. I have to have all this money in the bank or else I'll never find a woman who loves me, or whatever the story is, right? And so these extrinsic things, you can never really get to that enough where you actually feel whole. There's no integrity.
Yes.
Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, has three principles. The three principles of intrinsic motivation is, number one is autonomy. It's like it is a individual choice based on sovereignty. It's like I choose this, and I choose it because it matters, not because of a reward or because I'm going to get recognized. I'm choosing this because it matters to me. It's important to me. It makes me feel good, right? So number one, autonomy. Number two is mastery, a feeling of getting better at something. Is when you are, whatever it is, if kids are allowed to study what they're passionate about, they automatically get better. They get invested in it. They take ownership of it, right? So autonomy has this a bit of like an ownership, like it's my choice. It's it's important to me. I'm doing it not because of you or mom or dad or the church or other people's opinion. I'm doing it because it matters to me, my values. I'm I'm wanting to get better. I'm in the growth mindset because it's something um, that makes me feel good as I improve, right? And then the third thing is once you get good at something, once you pick what you want to focus on, you start mastering it, you're good at it. The natural next step is what's called connectedness or interrelatedness, and that's when you share this gift with the people around you. It exudes from you, right? And so when I help people find their intrinsic motivation, it is a conversation, and it's not a straight line. It's kind of like it's a discovery. It's like kind of peeling back the onions. Almost you have to remove what's not true
Yes.
to get to what is true at the core, at that essence. I'm back to that phrase that Bucky started with. Integrity is the essence of all things sustainable. And so sometimes it's removing the fluff or the superficial to get to those core issues that are really it's based on spirit. Inspiration, right, is different than motivation. Motivation is external. Inspiration is from within. It's from spirit. And that's the thing about it. It's an endless supply. It's a renewable energy that's clean, an endless supply of energy that never goes away. So if you can tap into somebody's extrinsic motivation, you don't need carrots and sticks.
And that's such a good, I'm so glad you answered that question, because I think it's so clear, the way you said it, that it's almost like when it's coming from the willpower, right? It's you're fixing the wrong thing for the wrong reason. Whereas really getting deep into yourself and understanding what's important to you, and then coming from that place, then the things you were trying to fix in the first place, they're just come into alignment, right? If we talk about like weight, right? Why do I want to lose weight? There may be very different reasons, right? The superficial reason, I want to look good so other people like me, right? And versus internal reason, well, I love my body and I just want to eat good food and I want to nourish it and I want to move it because it feels so good to my body to do that, but not because I'm seeking someone else to like me. And
Right.
perhaps my body is going to look different, but it's not why I'm doing it.
And there's nothing wrong with using both, as long as they're aligned,
Right.
right? As long as I would say, as long as the intrinsic motivation is primary. Because if you're taking care of yourself because you love yourself, because you love how it feels, because you love waking up and having all this energy that you can pour into the rest of your world, that's never going to change.
Yeah.
When you're 40, that'll still be there. When you're 60, that'll still be there. It's intrinsic. It's eternal. The kind of the most important optimal health, for example, is not a destination that you get to. You never get there. You're always working on it. It's different at different ages. It's different in different stages. Right now, I'm nursing a knee injury. So like my optimal workout routine is not available to me. I have to work around it. So as soon as the knee injury is done, I'll be back to my normal routine. But optimal health, when it's coming from that, like you said, from that internal, I love myself, very different than I want to get this person in my life. Because what happens? You get the person,
Nothing
and then
changes
you
here.
take care of yourself. Like, you get fat, you sit there, watch TV, and right.
Yes, yes, yeah. Okay, so I still like, want to talk to you forever, but we're out of time. But I will ask you one more question because that's very curious to me. You call yourself a lifestyle entrepreneur. What is this? What is a lifestyle entrepreneur?
Great question. I found myself, and I think a lot of people do, following into footsteps of parents or mentors, and people say, "Here's what you should do," when you grow up. And so I think a lot of people end up either stumbling into or just accepting whatever shows up as a career, and then trying to squeeze in a lifestyle around that. The classic story that everyone's heard of is like, okay, you go to school, you get good grades, you get your diploma, you find a good company, you go to work, you work real hard, you get your house, you save your money, and then you live a good life. And it always seems like you got to do all these things and then you live a good life. I decided that when I was in Costa Rica, there's 100 different ways that I could make six figures. And I realized and I've been making six figures since I was 24 with Tony Robbins. So I know I can make six figures and I know I can live comfortably on six figures. I said, there's 100 ways to do that. I'm going to find a way that doesn't gobble up my whole life. I'm going to find a way to make six figures that allows me to have a lifestyle, to surf, to snowboard, to be with nature, to not work 40, 60, 80 hours a week, but I can make a good income, making a difference, doing something I love. So I made that decision to be a lifestyle entrepreneur. What I mean by that is you identify your lifestyle first. Yes. You get really clear on what that lifestyle that you want 5, 10 years from now is. And then you come back and you build that infrastructure, that ecosystem and your career around your lifestyle. For example, when I was a pre-med student, I was interviewing doctors all the time. Like every week, I would interview a doctor and say, hey, I've got, one more year and I graduate. I'm getting ready to go to, apply to med schools. What advice do you have for me? You know what? Like 90% of the doctors I asked that question to said, don't go into medicine. They said, if you were my son, I would talk you out of going into medicine. And I go, why? And they go, because it's not what I thought it was. I don't have any control. I'm working all these hours, all this paperwork, all the insurance companies control me. I can't spend time with patients anymore. It's like 15, 5, 10 minutes with them. And I got to go to the next one. I don't have time for my kids. I'm on call all the time. And I was like, wow, these are my heroes. I want to grow up to be like this guy. And he's saying, don't do it. I realized that I better choose a career that's going to give me the happiness, the fulfillment, the lifestyle I want. So a lifestyle entrepreneur is someone who creates their lifestyle vision first and then organizes their business to support that lifestyle.
That's beautiful, because you know what? It kind of circles me back to what we were speaking earlier, because I think a lot of people go into work with an idea, okay, this achievement from work will bring me this internal satisfaction that ultimately they never get, because, it's again relying on the external validation of like, why am I going into this type of work or doing this type of work? Because I'm seeking some kind of feeling that I think is going to come later on when I get there, but it never comes. Whereas in your case, it's like, what is going to get me this feeling, right? You're going straight to the source. Like, this is the lifestyle that I want. This is what brings me joy. And how does my work fit there? And how do I create that? So
it's got to be integrated. It's got to be integrated. Yeah, if you can, and that's one of Bucky's things, is like when you do what you love to do for work, it's like it's a whole different life.
Absolutely.
And so if you can find that Ikigai, if you can find that synergy where all things are aligned, your values, your purpose, mission, your gifts, your income, your lifestyle, that's where it gets really fun. And then it's just about maintaining it and growing it. It's about nurturing the garden and taking care of it, and then saying, can I grow it? Can I teach someone else to do this? Can I expand through giving my gifts away? Like when I wrote the book, I don't need the income, so I give it away for free. I wrote the book because I wanted to help the next generation like you. I wanted to help these kids that have ambition and want to grow and do something good. I want to save them from having to make some mistakes that I had to make. Of the 10 companies I've built, 3 of them are still around, but 7 of them have, petered out. So, you're going to have some failures. And this is one last message I will give people is, sustainability is about long-term thinking. Sustainability is not about the quarter. It's not about the year. It's about the decade, or it's about the century. If you really want to build something sustainable, think in 7 generations. Think beyond you. Like, think big picture, long-term, and make those long-term decisions. And, surround yourself with people. This is the last piece of advice is, get yourself surrounded with mentors that have done what you want to do, that can pass along those principles to you, and they can show you the way and be your advisor, because you're going to make mistakes. That's how we learn. You make mistakes. So get comfortable with making mistakes, surround yourself with good people and mentors, and think long-term.
That's great. Thank you so much, Greg. So if people want to find you, or work with you, how can they do that?
Well, I'm on Facebook, so you could just find Greg Rex on Facebook. My Stoked page is Greg Rex Stoked, Stoked, and you can join there. I have lots of resources, interviews, some great tools and tips. Also, I'd be happy to talk to anyone who is looking for finding that balance in their life. If they need a coach to help them find that tetralogy, that balance, we could do the free assessment, do a coaching call, and yeah, I'm available. You can find me on Facebook and just message me, and I'm happy to respond.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your participation. This has been such a fruitful and rich conversation. So thank you, Greg.
My pleasure. Thank you, Maria, for doing this.
Yes.
Can't wait to see the other talks.
Yes. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you later at Sustainable Work.